I will be preaching from our gospel lesson. That's Matthew chapter 10, verses 24 to 39. If you get nothing else from this sermon, please get this. Jesus said it best, so I can't say it better. So I'll just say it again to you. Do not be afraid. You are of more value than many sparrows. Jesus says in our gospel lesson, even the hairs on your head are all counted. This sounds like comfort. Except one day my Uncle Dan looked at me, who went bald at the age of 25, and said, "I don't know, Dave. I used to think that was impressive. Now I'm not so sure. There's a lot fewer to count up there." Jesus is talking to his 12 disciples, and he is preparing to send them out. That's what this whole discussion has been about, both last week and this week. He's preparing to send them out 2 by 2 in a missionary journey to all the towns and villages of Israel. And he's preparing them for what they will face. He's given them authority to heal the sick and to cast out demons and to proclaim the good news, but he's also trying to give them a warning that it's not going to be easy. It's also not easy because last week Jesus told them you're not allowed to bring anything. You're not allowed to be prepared for the journey, which if you're a planner and a packer and a preparer, that just gives you all kinds of anxiety, right? What do you mean? No spare toothbrush even, Jesus? Nope. That brings us to today's reading where before they go out, Jesus is warning them that he himself has encountered resistance, that the powers that be don't like what Jesus is saying, and so they don't like him, and if they don't like him and they don't like his message, don't expect to get a better reception than he has. Don't expect it's going to be easy for you. Don't expect to have a time without any difficulty whatsoever. It is going to be hard and difficult. When I was in Youngstown, Ohio, I had a shut-in whose name was Maria. And Maria was a 93-year-old from Transylvania. She was Transylvanian Saxon, so German-Hungarian. She even still had the accent. It was wonderful. Grew the best tomatoes you ever would have. And one day I was talking with Maria, and I was telling her about all the things going on at church, and she looked at me, and I swear to God she talked like this. She went, "It used to be so easy." I kind of looked at her and I went, "What used to be easy, Maria?" "Church. It used to be so easy." I kind of said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, when you came to Youngstown and you were Lutheran, you did 2 things. You found the Saxon Club, and then you found the church. And that's all it took." And she was right about that. I think we used to think it was easier. But Jesus warns us that this whole church business, this whole discipleship business, isn't easy. That you're going to encounter resistance. You are going to encounter people who don't want to hear what you have to say. And that gets us to the next thing he has to say. So after warning them that they're not allowed to be prepared, and last week Jesus said, "I send you out like sheep amongst wolves," which doesn't sound all that fun because sheep get eaten in that scenario. And after hearing that they will encounter resistance and church will not be easy, Jesus has this interesting line. "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. And even the hairs of your head are counted. So do not be afraid, for you are of more value than many sparrows." I've been trying to find a connection between those two, between not being afraid and being worth more than the sparrows. Trying to figure out what Jesus was talking about. And I've come to this conclusion that often our own fear is connected to our own value. Often our fear is connected to our own feeling of worth. How often do I feel paralyzed because I feel worthless? And how often is worthlessness connected to an absolute fear that I am experiencing? So, faced with a hard and difficult task of discipleship, Jesus comes to us. You got to remember, these disciples, these 12 people that he's sending out, they're not the best and the brightest, right? They're a bunch of fishermen and a former tax collector and a failed revolutionary that Jesus has picked to send out. And faced with this awesome and difficult task, for us, faced with this difficult thing we call church, or just this difficult thing we call life, Jesus comes to us with this great and awesome and grace-filled reminder: do not be afraid, because you are worth more than many sparrows. Do not be afraid, because to God you are worth more than the people who think you are just a cog in the productivity machine of business. And do not be afraid, because to Jesus you are worth more than the doctors who think you're just some elderly person who's come back for yet another doctor's appointment. And do not be afraid, because to God you are worth more than the people who say you are just some young person, or you are just some person living the wrong lifestyle, or you are just somebody who's wrong. Do not be afraid, because you are worth more than many sparrows. Now, certain knowledge that we are worth more than many sparrows could lead to a kind of slothful arrogance, right? We could just sit comfortably in this building and we could say to ourselves, okay, we're worth more than many sparrows. That's all we got to know. We're good. I don't got to do anything. We could just be satisfied with that knowledge. But it's still the hard task of discipleship that we face. And so Jesus tells us that you can't just sit on your butts and do nothing. And you can't just sit down and say nothing. And in fact, the world needs you to go out and proclaim it from the rooftops. Jesus says it in verse 27. What I say to you in the dark, tell in the light, and what you heard whispered, proclaim from the housetops. There's a whole world out there that needs to hear that God values them more. That God values them more than their job, or God values them more than the people they're fighting with, or God values them more than the people that hate them. They need to hear about a world, and they need to hear about a God who governs the world, who sent Jesus Christ to us and thought we were so worthwhile. Thought we were of such value that death on the cross seemed like a good bargain. That God entered death because we were worth something, and God raised Jesus Christ from the dead and will raise us from the dead because God thinks we are worth something. Do not be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. It goes for all of us. It goes for my Uncle Dan, who is completely bald at this point. It's really easy to count the hairs on his head, let me tell you. It goes for me as I'm getting this balding spot right back here. That camera has a really good shot of it. Don't you dare, media team. It goes for all of you. It goes for all of you who are anxious. It goes for all of you who are tired. It goes for all of you who are sick. It goes for all of you who feel like you're dying. You are worth more than many sparrows. So do not be afraid. Amen.